This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode is brought to you by the New England Magic Collectors Association, NEMCA, who is hosting the Yankee Gathering 2024 in Nashua, New Hampshire on November the 7th through the 9th. For more information, we'll be having a short message by our sponsor partway through this conversation. And you can also go to the Magic Convention Guide. There you can click on the banner and actually go to the website for more information. And you can also then click to listen to a little bit longer podcast. We talk for about 10 minutes or so, give you more information about the podcast than what we give you here in this short announcement that will be, again, posted later within the body of this podcast episode. As for this podcast episode, I also want to thank and welcome our newest friend of the Magic Word. That's Michael Healy. Thank you, Mike, and welcome to the Friends of the Magic Word. He is the latest one to give us a donation for helping to keep this magic podcast alive and keeping the wheels rolling in the right direction. If you stop and think about it, over the last 45 days or so, I've given you 14, count them, 14 different daily reports. That's an hour or more each of each day of content about the conventions that have been going on, from Abbott's all the way through Magic at the Beach. So there have been several conventions going on, and it does cost money, obviously, to register for the conventions, all the transportation, lodging, food, etc. And so there are expenses associated with that. So any financial aid that you can help to support us, if you enjoy these Magic Convention reports, please help the convention train to continue by keeping those wheels well greased. So if you just go to the magicwordpodcast.com, you'll see a link there directing you to become a friend of the Magic Word, and you can get more information about how that you can help support us with your financial support. This week's episode is with my friend Alex Boyce. He is a young man at the time we were recording this, which was at Abbott's in Colon, Michigan. We were sitting in the principal's office at the Colon High School. And at the time he was 27, but he was going to be having a birthday coming up, so he is now 28 years old. Still a young man, but has a wealth of experience, and he discusses much of that here in this week's episode. But he also has so far to go and so much talent, and he works regularly at Speakeasy Magic. It's in New York City. He has a great dove act, does wonderful close-up. He is a graduate of the Tannen's Magic Camp, and where he also works as a teacher now. This is a delightful conversation. You'll learn a lot about him. So please welcome my guest here this week, Mr. Alex Boyce, here on The Magic Word. Today I've got with me a young man who we have known each other for a long number of years, and I see him at Abbott's Get-Together, which we're recording this now in Colon, Michigan, at Abbott's Get-Together, and he is one of the featured talent performers who is going to be lecturing then as well as performing. So I can't remember actually the first time I saw you perform, but we did spend a lot of time together when we were in Magic Cuba. I continue to go back to that convention about saying what a fantastic convention that was and the opportunity to go to Havana. So many people later said, well, I wish I would have known about it. It's like, if you just listen to the podcast, I'm telling you should go. Anyhow, Alex in particular in New York City also works at a nightclub called, what is it?
Speakeasy Magic.
Speakeasy Magic.
Yes.
That's right. So I want to talk about a little bit about that, plus his dove career. And just like doves, his career is taking wings. It is just, he's, again, young man, 31 to?
In a few years. I'll be 28 next week.
Oh my gosh. The career he's already had, and it's fantastic. And if you haven't seen him, you need to see him and go out of your way. If you happen to see him on the bill someplace, please welcome. That's enough about that. Alex Boyce. Hey there, Alex.
Hey.
So great to have you.
Great to be here. I know. I can't believe, I think, the first time you're saying when we first saw me perform or when we first met, I think it was probably at an MAS convention.
That is it. Yes.
And I would have been very young. I was certainly, I wasn't 15 yet. Mm-hmm. So that was a long time ago. I remember you hosted a show.
Yes.
And do you remember you did the talk show?
I did with Denny Haney and
yes.
I don't remember if Jania Taylor might have been in on that.
I think Jania was on that. That's funny. I now that you say that, yeah. And then, of course, you remember the furniture was brought up.
Yes.
And a tree, maybe? There was a tree.
Yes.
That got in the way of There was we didn't know this technology existed, but there was a laser across the room to check for smoke.
Right.
And then the tree went in between, and so the smoke alarm went off even though there wasn't any smoke. And so it was an eventful evening, and we got to see a show.
That's true. Got to see the show. Yeah, that was something. I remember Joey Casillo, Joey
the C, yeah.
is an attorney, and he was, because the fire department came and everything, and he said, "Don't say anything. I'll be your attorney if anybody asks any questions or anything." You know, it's like, oh my gosh, did I do that? Did I do that? So, oh my gosh! And yes, they evacuated the hotel.
I know,
and everything.
For the Magic Talk Show.
That was that's right. That's right. Well, that was a lot of fun, and that was a good convention. The MAS always is a good one. Mark D'Souza puts on a good convention then as well. Were you competing that year?
Probably. I definitely did. That was a big part of growing up in the Northeast. Was from maybe 13 to 16, I tried to do every youth showcase and competition and anything I could. And so, I think I probably was competing that year. Or I'd competed the year before, and they were nice enough to book me the following year. One of those. And that was a great thing about doing those competitions, was that happened a lot. You would compete and do the youth showcases and stuff. And then that's how I would get booked to perform at a convention and meet more people.
That's right, because people would see your performance and say, hey, this is somebody who we should have.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the best way. People have approached me and saying, how do I work conventions, or I want to work conventions? Well, you need to have attended conventions, and for people to have seen you at conventions performing to know something about you, unless you have some sort of a great video. But where are you going to be performing? You know, bar mitzvahs or birthday parties or some corporate shows? Particularly, I would think with the Dove Act. I mean, it's not like close-up that you're going to be saying, let me show you a card trick.
Yeah, right. Hard to do that in the jam session in the lobby.
That's right.
And also was such a great way to meet my heroes and the people that I admired, because instead of just approaching them and saying, hi, I'd like to meet you and know some magic, please, they got to see what I was working on. And so it was easier to have that conversation.
And I imagine a lot of people would come to you rather than you even going to them saying, hey, I enjoyed your show, or
kid, get working, come on. What are you doing? Either way, it was really nice.
Were there some people like that who came to you, Alex, who were heroes that is like, wow, I didn't know that you appreciated that much? Then they give you advice like, hey, you might think about this idea or this steel.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the magic community in general is just unbelievably generous. I brought my dad to Abbott's. That was sort of the deciding thing. They were nice enough to invite me, and this year, and I thought, it's a lot of fun and I'd love to do it, but you have to take the time away to do these kinds of things. And I thought, what would make it really worth it? And I said, I brought if my dad would come, I think he would love it, because of, he likes magic, not in the way that we're obsessed with it. He was never a magician but I think he loves magicians. He
supported you, I guess, perhaps all your career.
He drove me around to all those competitions.
How nice. What a great parent.
And so very grateful. And it's nice to kind of go back to that time to bring it now, to have him tag along and do this kind of thing. But yeah, magicians in general, so generous and giving. And I try to remember that now as I'm getting a little older, to try to continue to see the best in the youth and be part of maybe the next generation, not take it for granted that people are just going to figure out how to do this stuff on their own.
Well, who have been to your mentors?
Well, there's so many people who have been really, again, very generous, but they're through Tannen's camp specifically. I met a lot of people who were not just giving me tips and things, but really became.
So you grew up through the camp system?
Yeah, I went to the camp. My first year I went was 11.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly. And I haven't missed a year since at this point. It's crazy.
Do you teach now?
I do. Yeah. Every year. It's what I was saying. Yeah. It's really important to me to try to go back and be part of enriching the next generation of magic. And it is amazing to see the transformation. We just did camp a few weeks ago. And we're so lucky to have people come from all over the world that want to be part of it. And this year we had Zabrecki was a huge hit. Oh my gosh, to see these campers. The thing that I thought was so inspiring was so many of them come in and they're really technically skilled and they're passionate about card moves. But they don't have a lot of performing experience and they might not know what it is. And when you ask them at the beginning of the week, like, what's your goal for the week? A lot of them say, like, I want to work on my side steal. I want to work on cutting the aces. And when you got to the end of the week, so many of them, you go, what's your goal for the next year now? What do you want to? And so many of them said things like, I want to work on an act that reveals part of myself.
That is amazing.
It's like the transformation, to see.
It's not just had something to fool somebody, but I want people to know me and
exactly.
see me.
I want to put together a set.
Wow.
Amazing.
And how old are these kids who are saying this?
So yeah, the camp ranges from 12 to 20. And I'd say some of the older kids are the kids who are already kind of thinking about wanting to perform or how to do that. And yeah, the group, that cohort of the 12 to the 16s who had never even, a lot of them maybe haven't even seen live magic before. They've just seen a lot of stuff online. And to get someone do a full act and really see them perform was really inspiring for a lot of them. But it was a great year. I mean, Michael Carbonero and Blake Voigt and Danny Garcia and Jamie and Swiss and a lot of people, younger guys like Kevin Capinos out of Chicago was a huge hit. They loved him. It was amazing. Noah Levine does a show in New York called Magic After Hours, which takes place at Tannen's Magic Shop. And it's such an amazing show for any of the listeners.
Tannen's Magic Shop is kind of small. There's not a lot of room, is there?
Exactly. No, it's a tiny little space. But Adam Blumenthal, who is the proprietor, is a lighting designer and theatrical designer. So there's a full lighting rig in the ceiling. And of course, there's all this cool history and pieces of art on the wall.
So this is after hours, I guess, when the kids come in.
Exactly. And so, yeah, people come in after hours and they get a little champagne often and gather around. And Noah just does an really amazing show. So it was cool that he brought the entire show, the full-length show, to the camp. And that was really great.
Let me ask you, are some of the kids nowadays interested? I mean, you're doing a stage show with doves, and I was saying also it's harder to find, I think, a venue where people can go and do that kind of an act as opposed to saying, hey, I want to work a restaurant or strolling cocktail hour or whatever.
Right.
You're doing an act for a certain amount of time to music, et cetera. Are you finding that kids today interested in going that direction, or are they all wanting to learn card tricks and close-up?
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of them, talking with them and seeing what they're interested in, a lot of them are really interested in close-up primarily. However, through that experience of camp, they're exposed to different performers, and then by the end of the week, they get
mentalism and everything.
Exactly. They get inspired to do something new. And it's just that it seems like if they haven't seen it before, then they don't know that it exists. And they don't know what to aspire to do. And so, yeah, I think back to growing up in magic for me, especially to go to these conventions and things like camp. One thing that was definitely a game changer for me was to see all the different styles and genres, and also how many magicians there were who were not celebrities. They didn't have their own TV show, but they made a great living and they did what they wanted to do, and they performed artistic, beautiful magic, and were inventive and creative, and that it wasn't like trying to go to LA and roll the dice and maybe become a celebrity in Hollywood with acting or something. That this was really like there was a career path here. There was a way of doing this and I think also to think back to my mom and dad, who also were always, again, really encouraging. And it's funny because people ask what they do, and my dad works in engineering. He started a business making race car parts, of all things. And my mom is a recently retired elementary school principal. And so those aren't things that are so off the beaten path of career choices. However, the way they got there was they both worked at corporate in GE. And they left that to follow their passions. And so I think even at a really
more
young
entrepreneurial kind of...
Exactly, yeah. And so they always understood that the best ideas follow your passion, and because that will be the most invigorating, that you'll work the hardest and things will come. And it's been the case. Magic has given me so much. It's amazing.
But also
lucky.
Having a good education from the standpoint that some people think, okay, well, I know magic, I'm going to start making a living, and they don't go to college, but they need to learn theater and speech. And
I went to NYU and studied theater, film, and television, and I'm so glad I did. The flagship program of that experience was performing Shakespeare's Julius Caesar in jails and schools in New York City for an entire semester. So for 4 months, went to Rikers Island and the women's jails, and it was an incredible experience. And I learned so much about performing in general from that.
What were the audiences like?
They
appreciative, I'm assuming?
Super appreciative. The great thing was, talking about a captive audience.
Yeah.
The great thing was
Shakespeare for
I know
in prison.
Thankfully, people had to sign up to go to the performance. No one was forced to watch, so that was always good.
Yeah.
The audiences I always found were extremely engaged and interested immediately. And sometimes they would be talking, but they would be talking about the performance. So they wouldn't be chatting to each other about what are we going to do for lunch today. They would be saying, I would never do that to my brother. I would never, I remember this one stuck with me. There was two characters fighting at one point, and a guy said, I would never do that. That's my co-D. I would never do that. My co-D, my co-defendant.
Oh, co-defendant.
And it was like, I would never throw him under the bus like that. And I thought that was great. These people are engaging in the material.
Yeah, and they're relating it to their lives.
Right away, exactly, immediately. Wow. So that was really wonderful. And then we always talked afterwards. And also just to go into jails. I mean, we were past the visitors' place. We were always in the housing, and to see that world was something that I never imagined, and I learned a lot. So I totally think, I don't think about that experience every day when I perform magic, but that's all part of the history and the growth. And I'm sure all of those experiences of my training was really strange. And in some ways, the program, the way it worked was 3 days a week. I was in basically a dance studio and dressed in all black, no logos, no shoes, from 9 to 5, doing things like laying on the floor and doing voice and speech exercises, or doing scenes with each other, or doing these strange French mask classes and all kinds of things. And then the other 2 days were very intense academic, what you would think of a college classes. And so that was 4 full years of that experience. And then in the summers, I feel like I'm still on summer vacation, because what I do now is like what I did in the summers.
That's right.
I would go and do magic shows and go to magic conventions. Exactly. Endless summer. I feel like I'm still doing it. So it's such a treat to get to do this all the time. And go to things like Abbott's, and here we are.
That's right. Well, that surely wasn't all of your audiences. I mean, you were taking that around, obviously, the schools and things.
Schools too, right. Yes. Yeah, the schools was, in some ways, it was funny to see how similar they were, to see the little kids and these adults that are in jail, and how at the end of the day, you look out, see a group of people.
Retirement communities, I guess. Did you do those?
We didn't do anything like that, but I did that with magic growing up. Oh, I had so many disasters of being 13, 14 years old.
That's the place to do it.
Exactly. Go to retirement homes.
Especially an Alzheimer's unit. If you they won't remember that.
If you can get away with it.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
I'm not far from that. So,
but I did whatever growing up, any gig I could. If they called, I tried to do it.
That's great advice right there. The answer is yes.
Absolutely.
To anything that they ask you to do. Speaking of which, how do you feel about when people ask you to donate your time to some sort of a charity type of thing? You got advice on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, it's challenging. I think people have to find their own way with that. But often what I do is I make a number up of however many this year I'm happy to do that for. And then if I get a request for something like that, and it's a cause that I think is worthy, then I'm happy to do it. And then that makes it so it works out. I'm happy to give back. But you'd be surprised also how many places have an entertainment budget for a charity and a gala, and they want to be part of that. And I say, I'm happy to donate my fee. And they say, that's not what this is about. We want you to,
right.
We want to support you too. And so, but it's a great thing to give back for sure. Yeah,
but don't be afraid to ask for a fee from a nonprofit organization, because as you say, that they do have money. Yeah. And there are other ways, of course, of trying to solicit money, in which if someone sponsors you or whatever.
Can be sponsored, absolutely.
Right. There are different ways kind of around that then as well. But I think flight time is an important thing whenever and wherever that you can get it.
Yeah. It's just the more people see you, the more opportunities come. And more you learn, and like we've talked about before, having a deadline to work on something. It's great.
Well, that's the thing about, I was going to get back to competing, about what you would recommend to others. And you mentioned how you start to see some of the same people, I guess, when you're in competition, going to these conventions and everything then too. And talking about the deadline, that's something that well, I'm going to have to be ready to perform for this time. And sometime in the future, maybe 6 months or 6 weeks or however long it's going to be, but before you put in your name for the competition. But what's your advice on that?
I think my advice would be follow it as long as it serves you.
I love that. That's a good point.
I competed. It was, like I said, from like maybe 12 to 16. By the time I was out of high school, I had completely stopped. I'm not opposed to doing it again in the future if there's a reason, if there's, again, something that serves me. But basically, I'd followed it as far as it went, and it had led to the performing opportunities that I was hoping to get. And when I started being asked to perform places, then I started to realize don't need to be competing anymore.
I know it's kind of like, well, Michael Dardant and Sean Farquhar have won like everything. It seems like they just enter every competition.
Yeah.
And then there are others like Murray Sawchuk, who had won a lot of competition, and he got to a point where he got what he wanted. He got the show in Vegas, and one thing, it's like, I don't need to go and compete anymore.
Exactly.
But I think it's important that you have a good background in that, for all of those reasons of what you just said.
Yeah.
Setting a deadline and working hard towards a goal. And I think that's something else a lot of people don't do, is to have goals. I mean, to have something that's a 5, 10, 20-year goal from now. I mean, you're a young guy. I mean, you got to have some things. I mean.
Yeah, it's interesting. People ask about that. And I think it's a good question. What are your goals? And I think it's hard because the things I'm doing now, there's experiences I would never even have imagined. Exactly.
But you're there because you have a goal.
Yes.
Because you reach that goal sooner if you have a place to go to.
Absolutely.
I wanted to, when I was in the energy business, I wanted to be a director, and then I wanted to be a vice president. And so I had these goals at a certain time. I reached them sooner because that's where I wanted to be. And so I worked harder to get to that point.
Absolutely.
And the same thing, if your goal is to work cruise ships or have a Vegas show, you need that's something to look at and to shoot for. And I think you'll receive that sooner if you know that's where you ultimately want to be.
Yeah.
That will come sooner.
It's amazing now to think about like the show in New York, Speakeasy Magic, because it wasn't around when I was growing up, that I was there the first night we did it in 2018. But now to hear Tannen's Magic Camp kids go, what do you want to do when you grow up? And they go, I want to be a Speakeasy Magic
performer. That is so cool.
That's crazy, right? Because it wouldn't even existed. It wasn't a goal for me when I was growing up. And so it is really cool and exciting to see how that formulates. Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk about Speakeasy in just a few minutes, but going back then to Tannen's, and also, did you ever go, or were you young enough to ever have attended the Tannen's Jubilee at like Kuchner's?
Yeah. Okay. No, that was before my time, but we're coming up to the 100th anniversary of Tannen's. 2025 will be since 1925. And I've always been fascinated by magicians and magic history. And so growing up at the camp, I was always interested about the Jubilee and hearing about it. And did you go to the Jubilee?
I never did.
It sounds like an amazing thing. The one thing that I would love to see somebody be able to duplicate somehow, and I'm not sure how you do this, was the cool thing about the Jubilee was it took place at an all-inclusive resort.
Yes.
In the Catskills. And so what that meant was part of your registration meant that it was a full all-inclusive, your hotel, all of your meals, and what
it's like a cruise ship, basically.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that really is the only thing now that I can think of as the magic cruises and things like that have that sort of that thing where you can do an all-inclusive experience. And what's so cool about that is you go into the dining hall and you see all the magicians sitting with each other, and it's such a communal experience. That's really cool.
Does that culture of the Catskills and the Poconos even exist of what it used to be, where people would go there for nothing?
Not really since the jet age. It's that long ago. What happened is when all the New Yorkers would just go up there, and when they realized you could get on a plane in the same amount of time, go to the Caribbean or, to Florida or somewhere else, then the Catskills really started to dwindle. But I grew up not so far from the Catskills, upstate New York. And so one of my first gigs I did growing up was a place called Scott's Resort, which is like straight out of Dirty Dancing.
Okay.
Exactly that vibe.
Yeah.
And cool. I remember I called the guy. I was like 14. I must have been able to drive. I must have been 16. And I called the guy up and I said, "Hey, I'm a magician. I have a magic show." And he said, "Well, we've got a small group in, we're early in the season, but if you want to come out and do your show, we'd love to see what you've got." And I showed up, and I remember he was a gentleman. His name was Scotty, and he was in his 80s.
Yeah.
And it was a family resort that is grandpa had started and gone through the generations. And he came out on stage after he had played the drums with his son-in-law playing the organ.
How funny.
Exactly. And the people had just come in from dinner, and it was not a big group. I think it was 30 people or so in the whole resort. And he got up on the microphone. He goes, well, we've got a young magician here. If I'd realized he was so young, I probably wouldn't have hired him tonight, but let's see what he's got.
What an introduction.
Yeah, it was quite the intro. And I went out there, and at the
I'm
end...
going to have to remember that if they introduce you tomorrow night.
Exactly.
A young guy, I don't know what he's going to do.
We'll see. Buckle up.
We'll see.
And so, sure enough, the audience crossed their arms like, okay, what do we got?
Yeah.
And it did the show, and it was a great place for me growing up to have some sort of consistent thing in the
So you went there on a regular basis?
I did it for many summers in a row in high school. And then it was super fun. And his wife was also in her 80s. She would climb a ladder to get up on the spotlight in the back of the room.
Yeah.
It was quite the experience.
And you're wondering, there's this 80-year-old lady who's climbing up this ladder.
On a different finale. That was something though. But that was always really fun. But yes, the Catskills have vanished.
I know. I
basically.
remember the TV series of The Marvelous Miss Maisel.
They filmed at that resort at Scott's.
Oh, was
they
that
did.
right?
That's where they shot that all.
And you worked there.
I worked there. Exactly.
So when you watch it, it's like, oh, I remember this.
Exactly. Not only that,
cool?
and that Maisel experience, because they shoot out of New York, so many of the nightclubs and things, I've performed in almost all of the spots. It's really cool. They use the Slipper Room as a location. They've used the Box as a location. And so all these nightclubs I've performed at over time.
These are things that once you get to be my age and you go back and you start telling those stories to younger kids at that time, they're going to say, what? I don't know what you're talking about.
What Maisel? Right. Amazon what? Amazon. Hulu?
But
exactly.
Besides that, I mean, just the location, I would imagine that those things are going to be torn down or made for not high rises, but maybe people building condos.
That building literally doesn't exist. That building that I performed in, that Scottsaquagga, and they filmed Maisel, it literally fell down one day. There was a storm. It was that old. It just
like
fell down.
Yeah. So they obviously didn't use that as a studio. They had studios where they were shooting. So that was just really for outdoor scenes that they were shooting.
No, both. They did indoor and outdoor. And then they did,
Okay.
of course, studio shots and stuff like that too. Yeah. Yeah. But all the lake scenes and things like that. Yeah. Right there.
Wow. So in finding all those places, it sounds like that you haven't been working with an agent. You've just been on the phone and emails.
Well, I mean, I was in high school.
Well, of course, at that time. But I mean, my point is now, whenever you're going to be, you were talking about people getting flight time.
Look, I think for sure there's different ways of building up work. But for me, what was always important was that there was keeping different avenues alive. So there's lots of agents and people that I work with, and you want to invest in those relationships and make them thrive. And then the direct with the client relationships and have that, and the shows. And just that way, in case anything starts to disappear for one reason or another, different industry changes, then there's at least other avenues, and not
keep your fingers in many pies is basically what I hear you saying. When you were talking about agents, there are differences between party planners and agents.
Yeah.
Because an agent will work for you.
Right.
As opposed to, it's like, well, you need a magician. Okay, let's see who our I call them Muzak magicians. It's just kind of a person in the background that they don't care about. Yes. It's just a generic magician of some sort.
Exactly. So there was when I first was getting started in New York City, the great thing about going to NYU was, beyond the education, was that I was in New York. And so I had 4 years of building relationships and doing gigs in the city. By the time I graduated, I already started to establish a lot of relationships and work. And yes, the first gigs I was doing in New York they weren't calling for me. They were calling for magician. And so then over time, what began to happen was that they were calling for me, and they wanted me to perform because people had seen me. That's the only way to get people to want you specifically. But yeah, most of there's the social events in New York that's a lot of fun, and then the corporate work. That was always something that I had aspired to growing up. Was I wanted somehow, I don't know how this got in my head, but to be a Del Rey or a Channing Pollock and work in these hotel nightclubs that I didn't really realize didn't exist anymore in the 40s, and do a silent stage act and close up at a table the way that Del Rey or a lot of these guys would you do your act and then you would do close up at the tables. And I want, the great corporate magicians that were all these amazing heroes of mine growing up. And so I remember reading somewhere that all these great corporate magicians work for Bill Hers. Like, how do I get on Bill's roster? And I remember meeting him at a Magi Fest again, the benefits of going to magic conventions when I was a kid and I was in high school. I went, it's a great thing. If any of your listeners out there, there's a scholarship for youth to go to Magi Fest.
Yep.
I got to do that as a kid, so I think it's a really valuable thing. If you are interested in giving back to magic, Tannen's Camp scholarships are an awesome way to do that. The Magi Fest scholarship is another really cool thing to do. So I went to that convention. I remember meeting Bill there and getting all excited. I'd read some MUM article about him. And now, all these years later, I've been working with Bill for, like 6 years now on all the corporate stuff. And to be part of that roster of people like the Evisons, who I'm going to be performing with tomorrow night here at Abbott's, and David Williamson and Matt King and Michael Carbonaro and Chad Long, and the list goes on and on. But it's a really great team of people. David Gerard is another one, Ben Seidman. It's such a treat to be part of that world and to do this amazing thing.
Well, Bill has a great stable, and I've known Bill for a number of years then as well. And when he was working trade shows and they started doing this representation and everything of, as you say, the top acts. And when we were talking about Cuba, for an example, he was down there, and everybody probably who was there, he probably was responsible for.
That was a big part of it, for sure. Yeah, I remember hanging out with Bill there in Cuba, and of course you and the Pitchfords were there. My family met the Pitchfords.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's so great. I'll be doing some more stuff with MCE coming up and all of that stuff. That'll be great. But I remember sitting at dinner because we went to all those dinners.
Oh, we did. Yeah.
It was fabulous. Every dinner you went to, it was like, this is where Obama ate when he came. This is where the Pope ate when he came.
Yeah. And they bring you a cigar both before and after dinner.
Exactly. Yeah. And a Cuba Libre.
Yeah.
Because, I remember the list of drinks was, do you want a mojito or a rum and Coke? End of list. That was, we went, of course, do you remember that final show with John Archer in the nightclub?
Of course I do. I will never forget that.
One of the most incredible things ever. I gave him 5 standing ovations.
Yes.
It's the funniest thing ever. You'll have to get, maybe John.
We did talk about this.
Okay, so we have to go back on the podcast and listen to John's story of that. But I remember my mom, because the whole family came. It was because an amazing experience. My sister, my girlfriend.
Because you're not going to get another chance to get to Havana.
Exactly.
Right.
And so everyone took it, and it was the best thing.
And that was the thing. A lot of these guys like Matt King and others had brought their wives with them,
Absolutely.
For the people, you're going on and on. I mean, Eric Mead was there.
Exactly. It was incredible.
Dave Cox. I'd forgotten who.
Caveney and Tina. And Jade. It was an amazing week. And, but I remember my mom going up to the bar at that show. And she was like, I'll have a Cosmo. And they looked at her like, what are you talking about? Do you want a rum and Coke or do you want a mojito?
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Well, I was having my picture taken all around town, particularly the Orientals were there, and they had a lot of cameras. I mean, not just the phone. And saying, Papa, thinking I look like, I look like Ernest Hemingway.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And then whenever I went to the Hemingway house with Joey C. And his wife, and they were people who were just, it's like, wow, are you here all the time? You're like part of the property?
Right, yeah. They pay you to sit in that chair over there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Chad Long and his wife, were there.
Exactly,
also.
It was so much fun.
It was just a weekend of stars. And what I thought was kind of interesting is that the guys who were lecturing, you recall, couldn't bring in a lot of stuff, I guess, because they couldn't sell things, basically.
Yeah.
So they were sharing stuff, but not selling stuff. So it was one of those weird lectures that you attend thinking, okay, where can I buy your notes or whatever? No, not available.
Exactly. Yeah, it was
but
really
they were sharing intimate things that they wouldn't normally do because they had to think outside their lecture box.
Exactly. Yeah, it was the best. So much fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
So phenomenal. We're going to take a quick intermission for a word from our sponsor, the New England Magic Collectors Association. Well, it's getting more exciting as the days go by because we're getting so much closer now to the Yankee Gathering 2024 that's sponsored by the New England Magic Collectors Association, coming up the November the 7th through the 9th in Nashua, New Hampshire. And I've got with me right now Vice President, Mr. Mike Mayo. Hi there, Mike.
Nice to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks for telling us a little bit about this convention. It sounds like it's, from what I've seen and heard already, should be just a great lineup. Tell me some of the people who are going to be there, what's going to be happening.
This year is our 20th convention. We're celebrating over 40 years of being an organization, and this year we're honoring Bob Olson, a collector, historian, performer. We also think we have the biggest lineup of lecturers and speakers that we've ever had at any convention prior to this. We have Mike Caveney, Dean Carnegie, Ice McDonald, Rory Rennick, Bill Kalush, Jonathan Neal Brown, Tom Ewing, Michael Claxton, John Hodgson. And there's more. It's quite a
Wow.
jam-packed convention.
And what time will the activities actually start on the first day?
Thursday morning they will start and continue right up until we conclude with the gala show Saturday evening. So 3 full days jam-packed with magic history and collecting.
And on the 9th, whenever you do have the evening show, the big gala, it's going to be including your dinner along with registration. So that's a good deal.
It's a nice sit-down banquet dinner. Nice show. We have Matt Roberts, Kevin Bethea, Jonathan Neal Brown. They're going to be doing the show for us on the gala. It's going to be an excellent time.
Now, I know that NEMCA has their convention, and again, you have it biannually. So every other year when you host this, it's in different parts in different states, different parts of New England, I guess, and around. But this time you're going to be close to Salem, Massachusetts. And I think it's kind of exciting. You're going to be taking a bus tour over there.
Yes, we're going to be taking a bus tour to the Peabody Essex Museum in downtown Salem. They're putting on a exhibit of spiritualism and its connection to magicians and mediums in the early part of the 20th century. So we're going to be doing a tour around there with it's going to be filled with history and apparatus and playbills, different items from the spiritualism shows. And then also when we come back, we're going to have a lecture from Anna Thurlow, which is Marjorie's great-granddaughter of Marjorie the Medium and the Houdini fame. And she's going to be discussing the Houdini Marjorie seances. And she's never been at a magic convention before. So we're really excited to have her.
Wow. So if you want a chance to see and hear something that is really a touchstone to the past and to Harry Houdini directly, wow, this is the convention you should be attending. It sounds like so much to do, so much to see and to learn from a lot of these masters who have written books. And I understand some new books will even be released for the first time here at the convention.
Yes, a couple of people are coming out with books. I've got Mike Rose has a book. Margaret Steele has a book she just released on Boomski. And we are doing a Friday night symposium on African-American magicians as well. So we're going to have 4 different speakers on African-American magicians. And as well, we're going to be screening Quiet Masters, Ice McDonald's movie about African-American magicians. That's going to be screened Friday night. So it's going to be a great night of history.
That's great. Well, Mike, if people want to register right now who haven't already, and if you haven't, what are you waiting for? What's the website where people can go?
NEMCA.com. That's NEMCA.com. And that has all the registration details for hotel travel. We are at a brand new venue this year. It's a beautiful Sheraton Nashua. So there's room block information and whatnot. So head on over there, and we hope to see you all this fall.
Sounds like a great lineup and a great convention, and no reason why people shouldn't attend. So good luck for that. Good with the convention. And again, that's November the 7th through the 9th there in Nashua. NEMCA.com. Check it out. Be there. And now back to our discussion with Alex Boyce. But the point is, I guess it was Bill Hurst talking about agents who would kind of put all that then together. Not everybody's going to be lucky enough to find Bill, or even if you do, I mean, I'm sure he's got dozens of calls a day from people who are wanting representation, certain. And when you had first started and gone into Scotty's, did you have to send him a videotape when you said the guy had never seen you?
He literally had never seen me before.
Okay, so when you said that,
sight unseen.
That's weird.
That's not the case of most situations. That was a very particular funny gig. But I think even at a young age, I really wanted to make sure I had a website and a video and the kinds of things that people
But
would
like working
see.
Cruise ships also is another thing, is people sometimes think, well, should I go through an agent or should I contact the ship directly?
I don't know. I've always admired ship performers. I've never done one myself. But yes, I've heard lots of different advice on that.
Well, my advice is to go through an agent because if you go to the ships and they say no, and then you then go to an agent, they'll say, well, have you already tried so-and-so? It's like, yes. And they say, well, we can't help you.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah, they've got better relationships with these people people, and so they can act on your behalf and say, hey, you haven't seen this guy before. But if you have already seen the clip that you had sent to them, you've already messed in your pants. I guess, you can't do anything after that. So the best thing is to find an agent and have them convinced that they should be working for you. And there are several cruise ships, especially groups out there, that are handling that. So have you ever done anything?
No, I've never done on a ship.
Have you ever thought about that? Or is that
it's
something you want to do?
I've ever tried to do ever. No.
So you like hanging out in the city?
New York is great. Yeah. So all the stuff on the road is usually at corporate work or people having some sort of great party that I need to be at. I'm happy to do this.
I bet you get some good ones like Al Pacino or something, different celebrities.
Oh man, I just did one in Nashville a couple of months ago. I couldn't believe it was not a big party. It was only maybe 60 people there, but oh my gosh, the stars was incredible. And they flew basically 20 people from New York, 20 people from LA, and 20 people from the Midwest. They were all their friends, and they were just all these amazing movie stars and stuff. And my favorite movie forever has been Pulp Fiction, ever since I first saw it.
I'm with you, brother.
It was amazing. And so, you're lucky and magic to get to meet lots of interesting people and celebrities. And usually I'm able to kind of keep it cool. But they didn't tell me who was going to be at this party I'm working at. And I'm going to do the birds on stage. I'll do the act, and I'm going to do close-up. And so I'm just kind of walking through the party, doing a little bit of magic here and there, and just talking to people and getting to know them. And they're said, all right, everyone, time for dinner. Go and sit down. And I'm walking to my seat, and another person's walking to the seat, and it's Uma Thurman. And out loud, I couldn't help it. I went, oh my God. I couldn't help it. She didn't hear me.
Yeah. I'm surprised.
It was incredible. And I ended up sitting down at this table for dinner, and I sat next to this photographer who I meet a lot of interesting photographers, a lot of event photographers. Yeah. This guy is the photographer in New York. He's telling me all these incredible stories about, when he, anyway, really amazing photographer.
Annie
Annie Leibovitz is very famous. Yeah. This guy is the New York Society photographer. Gotcha. He's an incredible photographer.
Okay.
And he's exactly all the different celebrities he's photographed and how he convinces. It was one thing really interesting a lot of magicians would relate to is I was talking about how I approach people at a cocktail hour doing strolling and how he as a photographer approaches people. When do you interrupt? When do you not interrupt? How do you get a group of people to gather? How do you get two people next to each other to photograph? It's a very similar technique actually.
I never thought about that.
He's found as the same thing as being a strolling magician. And I told him, I said the one person that I really want a picture with tonight is Uma. And he said, let's make it happen right now. I've known Uma for years. Because in the same way that when you're a magician, people get to know people, they really know Patrick. This photographer, that's his beyond the lens and his talent with the photos is he knows everybody and knows how to connect people. And you should meet this person. And so he walks over to Uma. She's clearly eating dinner in the middle. And he says to me later what he told her. He said, if you want one picture with a person tonight, it's going to be this guy. You're going to see him perform later. He's the best magician. He'd never even seen me perform before. But he knew if I'm there, if they brought me all the way to Nashville from New York, there must be something, right? And she stood up and she goes, I heard you're some magician. We got the picture together. And you know what was the best thing? It was so magical. There was two things about that night were really great. One was that I got to bring my sister because she was living in Nashville at the time and get to show her my little world that I get to inhabit. And it was such a treat.
And she sees you with Uma Thurman.
And she got to meet everyone and hang out. And they're talking to her, asking her questions. So great. And then to see Uma in the front row standing up and cheering while I did the act on stage. And the other thing that was cool was they had a live bluegrass band. And I thought, well, we could do the recorded music that I have for the Bird Act, or I would
do it live.
We'll do it live. And so the musicians were the best of the best.
They could jazz.
Yeah, exactly. They played like a jazz Limehouse blues, but they're bluegrass instruments. It was super fun.
Yeah.
So that was a treat. Yeah, that was really really fun.
I would like to get a copy of that picture so I can post on the site.
I do. I know you have it. I can get you that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. What a story. I assume Bill set you up for that one.
No. So Bill is, of course, a specialist in all kinds of different arenas, but I work with Bill in corporate world. And so that was a private party.
I see.
Social event.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, but it's been a treat, learned, again, talked about mentors and stuff. I've learned so much from Bill. And the other mentor I have to mention was Johnny Thompson, because he made such a huge impact on my life. And, with Johnny, he was always so kind. You'd see him at conventions and stuff. He always shared. And
with everybody.
On everybody, exactly. I try to remember the way he treated people and made you feel special and like you're the only person in the room.
Exactly. I was going to say the same words. Exactly.
Right? Oh man, and so try to carry on that spirit. But he was so giving and taught me so much. And my notebooks at home were really are still filled with all of this stuff. Where I went and made these trips out to Las Vegas and sit on the couch and learn all the little details. And he was really so detail oriented that he would say, for instance, with the egg bag, that you turn left and they feel, and you turn right and they look, you turn left, they look, you turn right, they feel. It was that specific. It wasn't right, left. It was that specific.
Okay.
I mean, because he had learned those details over decades of performing.
Experience.
By the time I, was learning from him, he was in his early 80s. He had done all of it. So that was amazing. And I've been, all these amazing mentors since, but the most recent experience I got was incredible to have this session with Tom Maurice in LA. They brought him in as the Masters of Residence at the Magic Castle recently for
like a week. Oh, he performed for a week.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And they had him doing different workshops and things.
I didn't know he was doing workshops.
And so one thing they did was they wanted MCE, they wanted to do something where they brought in some younger people specifically to spend some time with them. And he did 3 days, and it went from 5 p.m. to 1 or 2 in the morning. And you went in and he made it so special. There was a ritual that you entered and you sat. It was only 6 people at the table. And that sensation, again, the magic and the technique is incredible, but he just has this, you just feel the magic coming out of him. He just emanates it. He transmits the sensation of magic. Mm-hmm. And you can't help but be so inspired walking away with that. And so that was just a couple of weeks ago, really. And that was an amazing experience. And so I try to find those things. And when they do come around, just grasp them and run towards it. Mm-hmm. Because I do think a little bit that, the more I perform, that of course you get something out of performing and sharing your magic, but it's almost like you're depleting your resource of your love of magic a little bit. That each time you perform, it's like you're giving a little bit of yourself away. And that doing things like coming to Abbott's or going to a magic convention or going to Tannen's camp, or, I'll go with a magician I admire and just spend a weekend at their house with them. It's like reinvigorating your passion and your love for magic. And so it's important to remember, the more I perform, you have to feed back to, you have to give back to your love, or reading, investing in a great magic book and really reading it and taking notes and trying to remember to do that all the time. You have to feed back your passion. So as you're
giving away some, you're actually going back 1 step, but going 2 steps forward.
Yeah,
gaining more.
Exactly. Yeah, because otherwise you get a little burnt out. And why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard?
Well, I think you can burn out if you just keep gaining without giving.
Maybe that's exactly what it is. Yeah, yeah. Having to, yeah. All my grandparents too were really big and influential in my life, and Grandpa Joe and Grandma Pat and Grandpa Frank and Grandma Helen. I remember Grandpa Frank has always been saying, you really have. The first thing is you learn, and then you do it, and then you have to give back. That's the third step, and you have to do it, and it's part of that experience. Mm-hmm. And it's a cycle, and it continues. And you just never know where magic will take you.
That goes beyond just performing. I remember talking to Simon Lovell. I was out in New York City many years ago. We were sitting there, and he was saying that I was writing this monthly column, long story, it was called Scott's Thoughts and different things. And I was putting them he said, you ought to put them into a book. And he said, release them. They're like your children. You're hanging on to them because you're creative, you're inventive, you are a writer, you can come up with it more, and you shouldn't be hanging on to these things. You just let them go, let them grow, and you don't know where they're going to go or how they might influence somebody and create more that will continue on with this bigger family, rather than just keeping your chicks under your wing all the time.
Absolutely.
It's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Same thing like with growing in magic, is continuing to learn, but to give away as you learn. It makes more room, by the way, when you give to by emptying that out, making more room for you to gain more knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Incredible.
The Speakeasy. So was that something that Todd Robbins started?
Yeah. It's an amazing story. I'll let Todd tell the entire thing at some point on the podcast, but it culminated at Speakeasy Magic in the summer of 2018. The folks behind the McKittrick Hotel and Sleep No More, which has now been running for I think 13 years now. It's an amazing immersive experience, produced the show and put it together, and Todd curated who was going to be there the first night. And anyway, it was an amazing thing. We thought, let's do it for one night. And then it went well, and let's do another one. And now, hundreds and hundreds of shows later, 600, I've done lots of shows, at least 600 shows there. And 6 years now, there's a purpose-built venue for it now, and 7 shows a week. And it's an amazing experience, I think, because it wasn't a conceivable idea of how do you produce a close-up magic show where they're actually close. Right?
Okay. How many people?
So there's sold out's about 100 or 110, 115.
And then you have TV screens or something?
There's no screens.
Interesting.
And no one is more than 4 feet away from the close-up magic. And it's
not in the round, is it?
No, it's not in the round. It's a smoky cabaret. It's exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to do when I was a kid.
Del Rey, like you said back
Exactly.
earlier.
I wanted to work this nightclub, but it didn't exist. And then somehow it was like the thing that I had been working for, and the thing that I was working towards, it just appeared one day, and it all came together at the right moment at the right time. So you come in, there's an amazing jazz pianist, Jesse Gelber, at the piano playing, and you come in, you have a fabulous cocktail, and there's things that happen on stage, of course, like Matt Holtzclaw does a cigarette act, which where else in the world are you going to see that? And is a fabulous magician and so knowledgeable about magic. And then the performers that are doing close-up, like Matt and myself, but also really top shelf professionals, Mark Calabrese, Patrick Davis, Rachel Wax, Prakash Peru, really wonderful. And then there's more and more. Jeff Kellogg, there's a lot of really great magicians. And so to see that all right there intimately, people get the sensation of magic. They really get this thing. And so what's so cool about it is not just that people come once, they come over and over. They want to bring their friends. And so it's built up an amazing audience over all these years, and I'm so grateful to be part of it.
So you have a stable of performers, certainly, because you got people coming back all the time. They don't know who they're going to be seeing then necessarily.
Yes.
Are you and the other performers changing out the kinds of stuff that you're doing?
Sometimes I find
repeat customers.
Yeah, a lot of times people really want to see. They're coming back because they want to see what you did before.
Okay.
So every once in a while, what I'll do is if I see somebody, I mean, it's incredible. Some people come 2 or 3 times, but if I see somebody who's I know has been 10, 15 times, then I might integrate one extra little piece. I might put something in there that they haven't seen before, just as like a little, wink to them.
Yeah. Saying thanks for coming.
Exactly.
Something
Thanks.
for you,
Here's
just
something
you.
New for exactly.
Makes them feel special.
Absolutely.
And want to come back again.
Yeah. Speaking of Eric Mead from Magic Cuba, there's a great passage in Tangled Web.
Good book.
Exactly. That comes from the Tower. And I won't spoil it, but for the readers out there, track down the book if you don't have it. If you do have it, pull it off the shelf right now. And there's a passage there, I think it's called The Walkout. And it's about how do you make a really big impact on somebody, make them feel really special. And just really good tip in there anyway.
One of the tips I got out of that was never set down a deck of cards without knowing what the top card is.
It's a great advice, right?
Yeah.
You never know.
You never know. Along that line, and with Speakeasy then as well, you hinted earlier about the importance of approaching a group in a cocktail setting or something.
Yes.
How do you do that? There are so many people who would, I hate that thing. Did you lose a knife? How about a white knife? I read
Right.
something like that. That's silly and I don't like it. But there are so many other ways of doing it. But what do you, don't tell me you do with a knife.
Yeah, Scott, you hate my bit? What are you talking about?
I'm sorry.
No, I think what I found over time is a lot of time when I'm performing at a private event, if it is close up, what I'd like to do is have a table and have a group gather around. And what I'll say is
come to you rather than
come
you.
to me.
Okay.
That's the best. But a lot of times they don't know exactly that I'm there yet. And there's a lot of situations too that it's just there's not enough space for that kind of thing, or there's just not a right environment for that. So if I'm doing strolling or walk around, what I find is having to remember, and it takes nerves it doesn't matter how many hundreds of times I've done it, every time the first group, it takes a little bit of effort to go up and introduce yourself. But once you get that first group, I can ride on that confidence for the rest of the night to walk up and yes, to your point, no, I don't walk up and say, did you lose the knife? Like anyone else at a party, I would walk up and say, hey, my name's Alex. What's your name? Nice to meet you. And then one thing I learned at Magic Camp, it was a class with Kostya Kimla and Garrett Thomas. I'll never forget it. We worked on our phrase. What are you going to say to these people? And in a short amount of time, I say, basically, my name's Alex. I'm actually a magician. And I was asked by, if you're throwing the party, Scott, I was asked by Scott to be here tonight and come over and meet you and show you something special. How about we get started? Yes. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why all of those words are important.
Yep.
But yes, that's the approach generally I take. And what I find is once you do that first group, they start cheering, they clap, you get that energy happening. People start looking over, they see this. And then the other thing about the rest of the night is people start calling you over.
That's correct.
And they want to see more. And it just happens much more organically, and you don't have to do so much interrupting. That's definitely the hardest part.
I like that as far as what you're saying of rather than doing a trick for them first, you introduce yourself to the group, so you're ingratiated as opposed to interrupting them with something.
And maybe ask them. I often ask them a question: how'd you end up here tonight? Who do you know? Are you friends with? Do you work here? Blah, blah. Which team are you on? If you're working this, and just have a little brief conversation, just regular cocktail hour conversation.
I think that was another thing that might have been in Tangle Web, or I'd heard Eric talk about, and that is when he said that he will actually engage with the audience and talk. And I think some other people, the story I'd heard where other magicians are working and they're over there just doing magic, and they see Eric just kind of joining a cocktail group with nothing in his hands, and he might have a drink even or whatever, but he's talking with the groups like, hey, shouldn't you be doing magic? Well, he is engaging and kind of getting until they say, well, would you like to see some magic? Oh yeah, let me show you something.
Absolutely.
So it may be 5 minutes or something, it's a different way of approaching.
Exactly. Yeah. You've got to find what works for you and stick to it and have the confidence. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. And walking up to a group is the hardest thing. And they say the hard thing to do is to walk up to a strange audience, whether it's a restaurant or a cocktail setting or whatever, and start doing thing. The hardest thing to do is to leave that group because you got to recreate that with the next group.
Sure.
And so once you feel you're in your comfort zone, I want to stay here and just the rest of the night because, you guys are great. Let me show you one more thing. And before long, it's too long. In this way, you need to have just a set, go to somebody else. And it's so hard to leave that comfortable environment to recreate that same experience with the next group.
Sure. But remember, it's going to be easier as the night goes. Once you do that first one, I can ride that confidence for the rest of the night. It feels so great once you've done that first one. And that's also, I try to be really particular about my first group then, because there are nights where I haven't picked a great first group. And then it's not the home run that I was hoping for. And now my confidence is depleted a little bit because it takes so much nerves to do that first group. And so then I find the rest of the night is not what I hoped it would be. So I try to be really particular about looking around the room, scanning. The first group I do, I really want to feel like exactly that's a treat. And the rest of the night I can just, glide by and feel that confidence going from group to
group. Well, a tip I can recommend also is to start in the middle of a group. So there are others that are around saying, what's happening over there? They'll hear something happening as opposed to being on the perimeter. The people on the far end of the perimeter are not going to hear that. But if you start in the middle to begin with, then others are going to say, hey, I want to see that too. What's happening? And so you create interest quicker.
And I'll share this. I haven't said this to a lot of people, but one of the things that I do, how do I perform this close-up show, especially in a room where, say, there's 100 people or 50 people. It's not like we're going to get everybody over there. What I'll do is I'll do a little bit of walk around like that, and I'll always say, hey, in about 20 minutes, we're going to do a proper show over here. So if you want to see more. And I do that a little bit, and sure enough, 20 minutes later, I sit in that chair, and a whole bunch of people come over, they gather around, and I get to do what I would love to do, which is sit at a table and do, 20, 30-minute show. And
Del Rey.
Exactly. It's such a treat. It's so great. So that's a great way of doing it where I don't have to work so hard with the client ahead of time of like, how are we going to get people to gather around? It's just, you basically become your own opener and your own,
nice.
You do a little bit of magic. Hey, we're going to do, if you like that, wait till you see what we do a little bit later. And so if that's helpful for anybody out there, I find that works really well for me.
I like that technique. That is a little bit different. You also have to have a place arranged with your employer to set up and have a place to go to.
Exactly.
For people to go over.
You want to plan that ahead of time, but it's not so hard. I mean, especially in an event to say, hey, we're going to have a table and a couple of chairs set up over there.
Yeah, that's right.
In the context of a big banquet or a gala or something, that's not too so hard.
Quick aside, talking about the, and then we'll move on here, about the Speakeasy. I've heard Rachel Wax on a podcast before, and she's lovely, and I have read about her as well. We have not met, but I am anxious to speak with her. I'd love to have her on the podcast sometime.
Absolutely. Rachel's fabulous. And such a really, I mean, she's just so charming and funny, and her dad is a magician.
Yes. I'd heard
exactly. He's great too. And so Rachel grew up with all of this. Exactly. And so she's really knowledgeable and wonderful, but I really admire her drive and her work ethic. She works really hard at what she does.
Yeah.
And I think they just announced it online. I saw one thing that's really exciting with Rachel is she's going to do a full solo theater show in New York City coming up next season at the Women's Project Theater. It's a really wonderful professional theater. And so people can look forward to seeing Rachel do something more long form.
Wow. Well, that's interesting too. And so again, are you doing your Dove Act as well?
Exactly. So you can see the birds at Speakeasy too, and a lot of other surprises. And Todd's always there hosting and doing wonderful stuff. And
do you know who's going to be going by going online to see who's working tonight?
No, it's always a surprise.
It's a crapshoot.
But for the folks that are listening to this kind of, this is our magic community here. If you want to email me ahead of time saying, hey, I'm coming to New York. Do you, this is the week I'm going to be there. Do you know which nights you're going to be there? I'm there all the time, but I take off to do things like Abbott's and the corporate work we were talking about. And so I can let you know, hey, I'm going to be there this night. And, make sure you get good seats and, make sure you have a good time.
Good. And do you want to give your email?
Oh, if they go to my website, it's boycemagic.com, and then you can get the contact info from there. Very
excellent.
Easy.
This has been phenomenal. I appreciate the time, my friend. It's always
same with you, Scott. If you're in New York sometime, I'd love to.
I don't get there often enough. Usually I go and stay at Michael Chout's place there in Forest Park, and it is so much fun. One last thing is, I remember when we were here some years ago at Abbott's, and you had come with a couple of other guys. We went to an Amish dinner, and we were doing a little bit of magic also. It was so much fun. And I've forgotten who the gentleman, you said there was one guy who was writing a book, or he was an author or a graphic artist?
Adam Rubin, maybe.
Adam
My
Rubin.
buddy Adam Rubin, exactly.
Yeah,
Adam Rubin.
Friend. Yeah.
He's a fabulous magician, and I know he's performed at The Session and Magic Live. And of course, Adam is really well known to people under the age of 7 because he is the author of Dragons Love Tacos, the internationally famous New York Times best-selling children's book.
Dragons Love
Tacos. So, yes, but he has a new book out called The Truth About the Couch. And it's fabulous. And is
it for children also?
It is. It's also a picture book. It's illustrated by a guy named Linears, and it's fabulous illustrations. And it's a new book. I loved it. I've seen him do the reading a couple of times. And one thing, I actually saw him and Linears do a reading at a bookstore in Brooklyn where we live. And Adam and Linears were about to do all of these schools, the tour of this book tour. Libraries. And the thing that I thought was so cool was there wasn't any magic tricks in it, but there were some things that made me feel like magic. And one was they had all the kids. Linears, the fabulous artist, stood up and he had the kids make suggestions of drawing a monster. Or what should the monster's ears be in this? And to see this come together, and it was wonderful. So anyway, if you get to see Adam, ever have a chance to see him perform or do anything.
Does he ever go to Speakeasy?
Yes, Adam does. He does a wonderful set at Speakeasy, and I won't reveal too much about exactly what he does, but you never see his eyes. I can tell you that.
Okay.
He wears a blindfold the entire time.
Wow.
But Adam and I did a project over COVID together called Bizarre Brooklyn, where we did an outdoor magic walking experience. Noel Britton gave us permission to use the name from Bizarre Bath and give us a lot of advice, things you would never think about when you're doing magic. But if you're going to do an outdoor walking magic thing, how far are people willing to walk? How far can you walk from one stop to another stop without having stopped? Great advice and all things like that. We built this performance piece in Brooklyn, and it was during COVID, so it was before theaters opened and that kind of thing. And what that meant was we had a lot of energy and excitement about people wanting to come and see something. People hadn't left their house. And so we got an amazing review in the New York Times and a lot of interest, and we basically did a sold-out run for months and months and months.
Wow.
And then when Adam could go back and start working on books and things like that again. Right. And I was able to start performing inside again. We both went off and did that. But it was an amazing experience. And actually, I won't say exactly what this is, but there might be something in the future with that. There might be a history coming up here with Bizarre Brooklyn.
Sneak peek.
Yeah, exactly.
There might be.
Keep your eyes peeled.
We will for the future. Well, you've got quite a future that's ahead of you as well. Congratulations
Thanks,
on all.
Well, it's always so great to see you and do this. Thank you.
Indeed, my pleasure. I love hanging out with you. And looking forward to every moment when we get a chance to get together. So the name of my podcast is called The Magic Word, and I always like to close, as you know, what your philosophy of life is. What's your magic word or phrase? Or
well, I'm thinking about being at Abbott's and the community of magicians and my family and all the things we just talked about. I think the word that comes to mind is generosity. Looking around, the people have been so generous to me, and trying to use some of that myself and continue forward with that. So that's today's magic word, at least.
Yeah. And preaching that word, telling other people they should be generous then as well with their time and energy and background,
absolutely,
knowledge as well. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thanks so much,
great.
Scott.
So with the Magic Word Podcast, that was Alex Boyce. This is Scotty out. What a delightful conversation with this young man. I know he has nothing but just blue skies ahead of him. His road is well laid out in front of him. I think he's going to be very successful in the future. So again, if you've not heard of Alex Boyce or you've not had a chance to see him, be sure if he comes anywhere near your area or you happen to see him at a convention, go out of your way to see him and hear him. He is phenomenal. Just such a nice, well-rounded young man. And I thank you very much, Alex, for being my guest this week on the Magic Word Podcast. I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Well, I think that's probably going to be a wrap here for this week. I want to remind everybody, if you have not signed up for the pod letter, if you go to the magicwordpodcast.com, there you can click on the opportunity to sign up for our pod letter. And by doing so, you will receive information each week when this podcast is released. It's the same time as the pod letter goes out and tells you who's going to be on there this week, who's coming up next week, and suggestions from the archives. Plus, if we happen to have contests, you'll be the first ones to know about that as well. So you can be the first to sign up for the contest. Also, if you can take just a few moments of your time to please give us 5 stars and any kind of a nice comment that you can by using iTunes or whatever format that you listen to your podcasts, please help us out that way. It helps our podcast to grow, and also it helps others find out about this podcast. So please give us 5 stars. We appreciate that. If you love it, also please share that by telling your friends about that. When you're at the next Magic Club meeting, please bring up the Magic Word. We'd love to have them as listeners as well. And one last thing, don't forget to visit the website for NEMCA.com, that's for New England Magic Collectors Association, to learn about the Yankee Gathering. Again, coming up November 7th through the 9th. If you're a collector, you'll not want to miss this because it's going to be another 2 years before they come back. So until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to be generous. This is Scotty out.